You're lying on your sofa, you've scrolled through every social media app twice, you've opened the fridge 3 times in the last hour, even though you know there's nothing new in there. You are, quite simply, bored out of your mind. It feels like a modern curse, doesn't it? A side effect of having too much technology and too much time. We tend to think of our ancient ancestors as being too busy for that. We picture them constantly running from saber-toothed tigers or desperately digging for tubers in the frozen dirt. We assume their lives were a 24/7 marathon of survival. But what if I told you that for 99% of human history, we actually had more free time than you do right now? Think about that for a second. No jobs, no commute, no emails from your boss at 8 p.m. When the hunting was done and the berries were gathered, what did they actually do with all those empty hours? Have you ever wondered if your ancestors felt that same itchy, restless feeling in their brains that you feel when the Wi-Fi goes down? Well, it turns out they didn't just sit around waiting to die. They were busy inventing the very things that make us human. But the way they spent their leisure time wasn't just about relaxation. It was a high-stakes game of social engineering. And the first thing we have to unlearn is the idea that they were constantly working. In the modern world, we spend about 90,000 hours of our lives working. That's a third of our waking existence dedicated to a job. But for 300,000 years, jobs didn't exist. Archaeologists and anthropologists have spent decades tracking the few remaining groups on Earth who still live like our ancestors, such as the Jew Huansi in Botswana. Do you want to guess how long they spend working to survive? It's not 40 hours a week. It's about 15 to 20 hours. That's roughly 2.5 days of effort to keep everyone fed and safe. The rest of the time, it was yours. When we look at the skeletons of these ancient people, they don't look like stressed out, overworked laborers. In fact, they were often taller, stronger, and had better teeth than the first farmers who came later. They weren't grinding their bodies down with repetitive labor. They were persistence hunters, which means they'd spend a few hours on a steady jog to outlast an animal. But once the meat was back at camp and butchered, the productive part of the day was basically over by early afternoon. So if you're done with work by 2 p.m., and there's no Netflix, what's next on the agenda? You might expect they just took a nap. And they did. Napping and resting were huge. But they also did something that seems totally pointless for survival. They walked 40 kilometers just to find some pretty shells. Imagine being so bored that you spend days using a stone tool to drill tiny, perfect holes into seashells just so you can string them together and wear them as jewelry. We found these beads dating back 100,000 years. This is where the boredom gets interesting. In a world where every calorie counts, spending hours making a flute out of a vulture bone seems like a waste of energy. But we found those flutes, perfectly tuned and 40,000 years old. We found cave paintings in places like Chauvet Cave that weren't just doodles. They used perspective, shading, and movement. This was sophisticated art that took days of focused work deep underground by firelight. Why did we do this? Because we are a social species. In a world without money or police, your survival depended entirely on whether your group liked you. If you didn't have a job, your full-time occupation was being a person people wanted to be around. We spent about 6 hours a day just in social time, talking, laughing, telling jokes, and grooming each other. We invested in relationships because if people didn't like you, they wouldn't share their food when you had a bad hunt. Making jewelry wasn't just about looking good. It was about showing competence and earning respect. Making music wasn't just a hobby, it was a way to bond the group together. Does it make you feel better to know that your need to show off a new outfit or learn a TikTok dance is literally hardwired into your DNA by ancestors who were just trying to stay popular enough to survive? But as the sun began to set, the boredom took on a much spookier, more profound tone. Because for 99% of our history, the sunset meant the world went pitch black. Before we had fire, sunset was the end of the line. If you moved in the dark, you became leopard food. But once we mastered fire, we suddenly unlocked 2 to 4 extra hours of usable time every single day. This completely changed our brains. During the day, our conversations were practical. Where are the berries? Who saw the tracks? But at night, around the fire, 81% of our talk shifted to stories. This was the original theater, the original classroom, and the original church. We sat in the firelight and imagined things that didn't exist yet: gods, ancestors, and myths. But here's the real kicker: they didn't sleep like we do. We think waking up at 2 a.m. is a medical problem called insomnia. For our ancestors, it was just the watch. For thousands of years, humans slept in 2 phases: 4 hours of sleep then 1 to 2 hours of being wide awake in the middle of the night, then another 4 hours of sleep. They lay there and thought. They interpreted their dreams while they were still fresh. They visited neighbors or sat in a state of quiet wakefulness. Scientists have found that during this midnight window, the human brain produces high levels of prolactin, the same hormone released during meditation. It was a peaceful, reflective state of consciousness that most of us have completely lost because of artificial light. We traded that midnight meditation for a light switch. But the need to do something with our minds during those quiet hours never actually left us. So why do we get bored? Why couldn't our ancestors just sit still and be happy they weren't being eaten? It's because boredom is a tool. It's an evolutionary alarm clock that tells us our current environment isn't providing enough input. For an ancient human, being bored was the push they needed to go explore a new valley, try a new tool-making technique, or strengthen a social bond. We see this even in animals. When a wild animal is trapped, its body goes into a threat assessment mode, flooding with cortisol. But when that threat is suspended, like when a human helps a trapped wolf or whale without acting like a predator, the animal often stays near the human for no biological reason. They orient toward us, make contact, and seem to be processing something that serves no survival function. We are the same, but on steroids. Our brains are so busy growing and wiring themselves that we actually overwrote our own earliest memories just to make room for more processing power. We are literally built to seek out patterns and meaning. When we were bored in the Ice Age, we didn't just survive the cold, we engineered it. We built houses out of mammoth bones that were just as thermally efficient as modern Arctic shelters. We didn't do this because it was easy. We did it because we had the time, the tools, and a refusal to just sit there and freeze. Isn't it strange that we spend our whole lives working to retire into a life of leisure when that leisure is exactly what our ancestors already had, and they used it to invent civilization? So the next time you're sitting there, staring at your phone, feeling that heavy weight of boredom, don't feel bad about it. That feeling is the direct descendant of the spark that painted the caves of France and carved the first flutes of Germany. We are the only species that looks at a nothing afternoon and decides it's the perfect time to invent a god, a song, or a new way to sew a mammoth hide. Boredom isn't a sign that you're lazy or that your life is empty. It's the highest compliment your brain can pay you. It means all your survival needs are met, and your intelligence is now so vast that it's looking for a way to overflow. Boredom is the price we pay for being smart enough to realize that just surviving was never going to be enough for us. We didn't invent art, music, or stories to pass the time. We invented them because we had so much time that we finally had the chance to become human. So here's a simple experiment. The next time boredom hits, don't escape it. Don't grab your phone or rush to fill the silence. Just sit there for a minute and let your mind wander like it's supposed to. Because that's where the interesting stuff starts. Ideas, questions, weird thoughts you didn't expect. That's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. And if this made you see boredom a little differently, stick around. Because we're just getting started.